Bob said he would be happy to
Sure.
introduce Jesse properly since you
Yes.
all have been working together. So I'm
Great.
just going to turn it over to you and let you guys do your thing.
Great. Listen, thanks so much for taking the time. I know you're all very busy. So I guess around a year ago, we realized it would be important that we try to provide some kind of situational awareness as first we could in the morning for people, particularly when we were dealing with such an aggressive administration that was involved with like bombing Iran, abducting leaders of other countries like Venezuela. And that it would be great if we could have someone based in Europe, because that meant that while the United States was sleeping, or most of it was sleeping, we would have a coherent broadcast that could lay out distinctly what our tax dollars were doing overnight. And so Jesse, being situated in the Netherlands, was a great person to talk about it. He has had extensive experience at WBAI, and then also as a reporter that came up through community journalism when he came up through community journalism in Brooklyn and in New York City. He certainly knew how to gather news, and so he spent he had Trump Watch, which was very successful BAI, and so having this global perspective with them based in the Netherlands gave us an opportunity to have this 5 minute concise reprise of what had happened. And so that is something that seems to be getting traction. How he does it is he'll explain it. We're very much interested in getting your feedback. Jesse, go ahead.
Okay, so I think what I wanted to start with is just a little bit of the thinking that went into the headlines as Bob and Ursula and I, created them and, taking people's feedback in mind. So, with that being said, maybe I'll start with a little audience participation. Does anyone care to give me a definition of what the news is? Like what any news is, what a news broadcast is? Anybody know? Okay. A resounding silence from the crowd. Well, I would say the news is anything that we decide that it is. Um, and even the broadcasts that have the best intentions, that set out to and aim to be neutral, uh, they have a point of view because of what they choose to include in that broadcast and what they choose to exclude from the broadcast. Now, to be clear, all the rules of ethical practices of journalism still apply, citing sources, uh, reporting the facts, avoiding editorializing, avoiding making yourself the story, all the things that those of us who studied journalism learned in J school or in a class in college or high school, they all still apply. Um, but what I'm saying is all the other stuff, all the window dressing, it needs to be this length of time. It needs to be delivered in this voice. These are the kind of stories we focus on. All of that is pretty much arbitrary. And if the answer that the news is whatever we decide it is unsatisfying to people, there is a more precise analogy that I keep in mind, and it's something that I created a long time ago in my mind, and I think of it as a fable. So if you'll indulge me, this is how I think of the news. So imagine it's a long time ago, a time before mass media of any kind, not even writing. You live in an ancient town on a mountain, and the mountain that is across the woods from you, that you gaze upon every day, is engulfed in flames. And your village has sent a sentinel over to survey the damage, to talk to the people there, to see how close it is to your village. And that sentinel has just returned. And you ask him what he sees. Everything that he says, that's the news. And the reason that I took you on that long walk the reason that I think of it like that is because um, the same things that would be problematic in that scenario are the same things that are problematic in a news broadcast, right? You wouldn't want that sentinel to say, "Hey, coming up, I'm going to tell you about the news on the mountain. I'm going to tell you about the woods. I'm going to tell you." You just say, "Tell me, what is it? What's happening?" You know. Also, if the sentinel said, "Well, I was on my way to the fire and I saw a lovely wood and then a lovely meadow," right? So, with those things in mind, I think that there's a lot more flexibility in what a news broadcast is than maybe we've told ourselves. I think there's more leeway. And to illustrate that, I've got a couple examples I'm going to try to play for you if this works. Because we've changed over time as a culture for what we say, what we've decided a news broadcast has to be, right? And so, for a little bit of context, here is a random broadcast of the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite from March 24th, 1978. I'm just going to play you like the first 30 seconds of the broadcast. So, here we go.
This is the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite.
Good evening. There aren't any substantial overall returns on the coal union balloting today, but some of the toughest locals are voting to go back to work, and partial unofficial vote counts compiled by news services show a sizable trend toward ratification. More from Barry Serapin in Washington.
And then he throws to the reporter. Note the subject. He's talking about a coal union. Note the delivery, relaxed, inside, not needing to talk to you as if you're a fourth grader, assuming that you're informed or at least that you'll catch up. And most importantly for me, and this isn't a point I'm really going to belabor because we're talking about a 5-minute news broadcast, but I do think it is worth noting, no promo for what is coming up in the next hour of news. Now, for a little contrast, here is a clip of the Situation Room with Wolf Blitzer and Pamela Brown on CNN from about a year ago.
I'm Pamela Brown. Breaking news. Sudden sticker shock. Target says its prices will likely rise in the next couple of days as President Trump escalates his trade war.
And severe impact. New CNN reporting on the pause of U.S. military aid to Ukraine as Russia attacks a key Ukrainian city with nearly 100 drones in an overnight aerial assault. Welcome to our viewers here in the United States and around the world. I'm Wolf Blitzer.
And that's CNN World, the smart CNN. So, again, look at the issues. Wolf is talking about hundreds of people killed in Ukraine, but that is not as important as the previous story, right? What's going on at Target?
Breaking news. Sudden sticker shock. Target says its prices will likely rise. And
Target prices are rising. That is the top story. And I'm focusing on that for another piece of our thinking, and certainly my thinking doing the Pacifica headlines every day, which is the way that the news is delivered, certainly in America on most mainstream outlets, is very much a pro-capitalism angle, right? When I started, or we started Pacifica headlines the Monday after the Iran war started. So March 2nd, I believe it was. And so much of the reporting, even in the early days of the war, as massive numbers of bombs were falling, the focus over and over again was the oil prices are going up. What this means for you at the pump. Well, what about what this means for the millions of Iranian people who have bombs falling over their heads? And isn't that enough? Do we always have to dumb it down? Do we always have to reduce it as if there's Homer Simpson on the other end of the TV saying, well, how much is it going to cost me? Sure, there's a place for that. But I mean, even NPR in their hourly news breaks, they always give you the stock ticker, right? I remember even as a journalist, and certainly before I started in journalism, going back 15, 20 years, like listening to that NPR broadcast and hearing the stock market. And the feeling I had is, oh, this is not actually for me. They don't even care about me in this broadcast. And so wherever possible with Pacifica Headlines, I am looking to go past the economics and into what is actually happening, the issue areas behind that, and what it really means. Now, there are times, right? A housing crisis, any kind of bubble, any kind of, inflation. There are economic stories. Now, I want to be clear about this. I am not saying we need to excise economic stories from the news. That's not true. But I'm talking about this core perspective at CNN and a lot of other broadcast news, a lot of local news stories, that it's always about how much it's going to cost you. Welcome to the How Much It's Going to Cost You show. Because how can you blame the public for being uninformed or not understanding the nuance of issues? Around elections, we always talk about how voters don't understand the nuance of this. I hear a lot of progressives talking about that. Well, if you don't actually inform them on those issues with nuance, where will they get the nuance, right? So the nuance is important. And, it's certainly something that I'm always doing my best to keep in mind. And I'm going to play you two more examples just to illustrate this point, and that'll be it then we'll get into the actual production of how I'm doing this. So I'm going to play a clip from 1010 Wins, and I am not at all picking on 1010 Wins. They do some great local reporting, but I just think the tenor of this, the delivery is standard news delivery. Here we go.
So for 4 quarters, you'll get either the Grand Central clock and starry ceiling, among some of the things, or you'll get the cross streets around Grand Central, or a New York City bagel, or a
I'm going to take it back to the beginning. Here we go.
Metro card. And everybody's lets you relive your childhood. That's what it says here. It's a mini print vending machine which spits out a surprise art print depicting a New York City icon. So for 4 quarters, you'll get either the Grand Central clock and starry ceiling, among some of the things, or you'll get the cross streets around Grand Central, or a New York City bagel, or a Metro card. And everybody's flocking to the thing.
Right. So that kind of delivery, that's sort of the radio version. Local news has its own version, that very heavy bass tone, right, where you deliver all of the news as if you are a game show host. Bob and I have joked about this a lot, but when I hear news where the announcer is that heavy-handed and delivering, that thing that they teach you in in communications classes, where you bring your tenure up and then you bring it back down, but then you get serious and low, but really for the big conclusion you go up. All of that stuff, again, to go back to my original point, that is a decision about the way that we are choosing to deliver the news. And the final piece of this whole thing for me, it goes to music. As Bob and maybe some of you know, music has always been my main, it's been my sort of life's work. I went to music school before I studied political science. And I still am a working musician. And actually, again, some of you might know, I composed the music that we use in the Pacifica headlines. Now, from our station to a lot of stations to a lot of television, I just want to talk about the opening theme of news broadcasts, because they usually have this cross between a kind of AI calculator gone haywire and the something bad is about to happen music, dot, 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 dump, da, 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 da. I don't have to give you those examples because you've heard them so much. Just listen to any news broadcast pretty much, and you will find that kind of music. But who decided that this sort of irritating music is the way it should be. Much like The Voice, the game show host voice, or the stock ticker, in the broadcast. These are things that, to me, send a message to people. I am speaking for myself, but I am assuming I'm not alone. This is not for you. You are not our prime audience. I got my start in journalism when I was still in college, as part of a program that Hunter College has up in the Bronx, that this Pulitzer Prize winning reporter, Bernard Stein, who was a mentor to me, he started it. He won the award for as editor of the Riverdale Press, a great paper in the Bronx. But he started this paper called the Hunts Point Express. For those of you who don't live in New York, Hunts Point is one of the most economically challenged areas of the whole city, certainly of the Bronx and the South Bronx, though it's seen incredible revitalization in the last few decades. It's been a difficult place there regarding crime and poverty. And he made this incredible point that the reason he started that paper in that neighborhood and made it a college program, he said, because there's not enough money in this neighborhood to start a newspaper. Newspapers are places where advertisers want to buy advertising. And if there aren't rich people, then there aren't the people that advertising is meant for. So we're Pacifica, as I assume you all know. We are nonprofit, listener sponsored. I feel like we have an obligation to deliver broadcasts that are clearly for everyone. Not for intellectuals alone, not dumbed down either, not just for rich people, but also not just for card-carrying Antifa members, something for everyone. And I know I'm a little bit all over the place, and you're gonna have to excuse me because that's just the way that I think and operate. But I think that is something that we really that we need to keep in mind as we move forward, because the facts are important and news is important. I think you could very much argue that we would not be in the situation we're in now if we had a better informed populace. I live in Europe, as Bob said. I live in the Netherlands. Let's take TV news, because I do not speak Dutch, unfortunately. And so I don't really read the papers here, at least the hard copies. But if you go on your cable, basic cable package here, you have CNN, but it's CNN International, which is a little more informed, shall we say, a little less headline chasing. But then you also have Al Jazeera's network, which does incredible reporting. And you have probably my favorite cable news channel, Euronews, which offers very detailed, nuanced reporting. And I know it's been said so much, it's basically a cliche. Oh, why are the Europeans so informed about the news? Well, I think that's why. I don't think it's like a genetic predisposition to finding things out or knowledge or any of that. I've met just as many blockheads in this country and touring around Europe as I have in the U.S. And there are intelligent people here and there, of course. I don't think that's what it is. I think you can only be as smart as the information that you are able to access. And I don't think we should shame anyone for assuming that the people that make the news know what they're doing. Oh, this must be the way you absorb it, including, getting back to my previous point, the theme song. So, one of the things if we have time for, get into at the end, and that's one of the reasons that Bob was so kind to join us, is that Stephanie asked me also to get into the national show that Bob and I produce. He's the EPM, the producer, which is We Decide with Jenna Flanagan, where I'm also the music supervisor for that show. And the opening theme is Democracy by Leonard Cohen, which Bob chose. But the idea, again, that whether it's a 3-minute broadcast, a 5-minute broadcast like ours, or a 2-hour broadcast, these are the things that this is the way the music's supposed to sound. I just never fully bought into that. And since I've done this news report, and especially since I was asked to do this talk, I've been thinking a lot about where that idea came from. Like why, no one has ever brought this up to me. So where did this idea come from that the news doesn't have to have this kind of soundtrack? And the answer is what I am going to play for you now.
Weekend update with anchor person Dennis Miller.
Thank you. Good evening. And what can I tell you? Our top story tonight, Parker Brothers.
Okay, so yes, it's Saturday Night Live. And yes, it's Dennis Miller, who went on to become a real right-winger. And Saturday Night Live hasn't ever even done this before. But in 1991, when this aired, I was a 14-year-old kid. I was, the first Saturday Night Live that I ever watched was Dennis Miller as the host. And Saturday Night Live has had a huge impact on me my whole life. I'm a big comedy nerd, and I own the first 5 seasons on DVD, if that gives you any indication of how into SNL I am. But just to say it had a big impact on me anyway. But that idea of a news broadcast with a rock song that pops, it's completely different, right? It's completely different even from anything that Saturday Night Live ever did. But by the time, yes, a fake news anchor, but a news anchor nonetheless, Dennis Miller starts talking, I am so ready to hear what he has to say. Whether it was funny or not funny, didn't matter. I was so engaged and sort of amped up, for lack of a better term to use. It completely changes the essence of the broadcast. And so I just wanted to play you that stuff with some ideas that have gone into the broadcast. And what we're thinking about. Now, I might ask Bob if he wants to add anything before I get into the actual technical, like step-by-step of how I do the broadcast every day. Bob, I don't know if you have anything you want to add. Is he still there? But to just go through very quickly some of the other things that I like to keep in mind. I'm can be a complainer, but for many years, my significant other was someone who hated complaints. And even since I was young, I do have to say, even pre-relationships, it's always been my inclination to do something about it. It's why I went to, as a scholarship kid, went away to school in high school to study music. I got tired of complaining about high school. And I feel that we can complain about the news. Everything I just gave you was a sort of, some may say, long-winded criticism of the state of news. But the only answer to it is creating a broadcast that reflects the values that we have and the things that we think are important. And every day, one of the great pleasures of doing headlines is being able to sort of shift around the news stories. To use one last Saturday Night Live analogy, some people may know that they have these index cards on a board, and that is how Lorne Michaels decides which sketches are going to go where and what's getting tossed out. I think of all the top stories like that, where if the New York Times might have them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, well, maybe 5 is really the important one, and we can stick that back up. And I do my best to also focus on things that, okay, maybe there is a big money reason, or at least reason from the top, that these stories are not getting any play. Bob, I just saw your lovely face flash on the screen. Is there anything that you want to add before I get into the technical stuff about sort of some of the ethics or at least conceptual stuff of how we're thinking about headlines.
So I just wanted to say that I really enjoyed the examples you gave, and the idea that what I enjoy about your cast is that it brings the sound of the actual event. And so what that does is they say that a picture conveys 1,000 words. Well, compelling audio, the sound of a relative digging for a child in a collapsed high rise, the sound of people actually mourning the loss of a national leader, that actual sound communicates an emotional arc to what's happening in the world. And then keeping the focus on loss of life, like what is the impact, and having a sense of the narrative being driven not by the price of a commodity, but by the impact on humanity, with an eye towards an informed eye about issues related to scarcity, destabilization, supply lines, and all of that. And so in that 5 minutes, there's, I would say, if you were to look at it, there's an awful lot of actuality embedded in it, right?
Yes.
And so over time, you've also started to weave together how these things are connected. And so that permits you an economy of words. And so there's a compression that occurs where you're able to go from one thing to another because over the arc of repetition, you've laid a framework. And so that's all I have to say. Thanks.
100% yes.
I want
And
to say thank you too, Bob and Jesse. I think you just capsulized. It was really refreshing how you opened it up, Jesse, and compared Walter Cronkite to what people are doing now. And and how Bob framed it as focusing on humanity instead of money, I suppose. Maybe is that oversimplifying, but would you, if you had to name it, because you said like CNN is focusing on capitalism, so what would you name? Do you have like a hierarchy of focus that you prefer to address?
human beings at the top,
Okay, yeah.
humanism, if we're putting it in those, if we're equating the two, it's it kind of seems obvious to me. If you talk about capitalism, you're basically doing a news broadcast for the rich. If you talk about people, you're doing a news broadcast for everybody, you know? And if you could say, and one of the other things that came into my mind when I was preparing for this and thinking about what I wanted to say, I was remembering when I started, and Bob's right, I got my start in local journalism in New York City at the Home Reporter, Brooklyn Spectator, and then I worked for DNA Info doing a lot of crime and a lot of shootings. But I remember at some point in there, and one of the great things about being, on a stakeout, as they call them, is that you're surrounded by someone from the New York Post is there, someone from the Daily News is there, someone from the New York Times, usually the local outlets are there. And so you're all just standing around waiting for whoever, the father of someone who was shot, to show up so you can try to get a statement from them. But in the meantime, you're basically talking shop. And that was very helpful and eye-opening, but even more eye-opening was watching the way that these different journalists rather did their jobs and what was required of them depending on the news source, right? And so again, I just think it happens so much in our field that we are enforcing these rules on ourselves. I mean, I understand a lot of things in musical terms, obviously, but it happens a lot in music, right? Where if you're writing songs or recording songs, people, whether it's a band or a solo artist, you get into a mind state of, oh, okay, well, it's got to be like this, and it's got to have a drum part like this, and it's got to have that. And you reach a certain point, if you're lucky, as I have been, to still be in the game, where you realize that all of those limitations are in your mind. You are the only person who is telling yourself that this song needs a drum beat or this kind of guitar. And it's the same thing with news, you know? And the actualities are a really good point. I'm really glad Bob brought that up. I wasn't originally going to talk about that, at least as such, but that was something that I did. Excuse me for moving the microphone. My tower of books here was getting a little, moving the camera rather. My tower of books was ready to fall. Um, you know, right when I started the news, I came up with the conceit that I wanted to open it up um, with some kind of audio, right? Bob and I talked about each report, ideally 3 clips. So what I found was an odd, a talking head can be fine, especially if it draws the story. But, and you'll see where I'm pulling all this audio from in a minute when I go through the process. But, the different news agencies who I'm pulling footage from YouTube from, were all posting this incredible audio, whether it was explosions or, like Bob said, there was some just really wild audio. I mean, wild is the wrong word. Tragic and disturbing audio coming out of Venezuela of people digging out their loved ones. And he's right. People often say a picture is worth 1,000 words, but the same thing works for a sound, and I just realized that there were a lot of ways to tell the story. I think it's a classic trait for anyone in the news business to think the answer always comes from them. If the news broadcast isn't good, it's something I'm not doing. I need to be, I don't know, more energetic, or I need to draw from more sources. But often the answer is somewhere else. The answer, if you really work, as I hope to work, to keep one's ego out of it and really ask, what is the most effective way to tell this story? What is the best way to draw someone in? Yeah, I mean, I can give you the numbers. I can tell you that, there's 238 people confirmed killed and 5,000 people missing, just to pull those numbers out of the air. But to hear someone crying, to hear the anguish of a father in Gaza who just lost their 7-year-old child, the child is laying on, the stretcher in front of him. That's the kind of thing that, for obvious reasons, they won't put that on the evening news, right? It's much too disturbing for people to handle, but the audio is different. It's a bit of a gray area, and I do keep all of that in mind and do my best to issue a warning if there is going to be anything really graphic. And I also do my best to keep, to not overuse that device, to only use it when it really calls for it. And I'll get into this a little bit more when I talk about picking the clips, but one thing that I do set out to do, and this is something that sort of developed over time, if the news broadcast is like 2/3 at least audio, so 5-minute broadcast, 2 minutes of audio, 3 clips ish, that is, or sometimes more. To me, that's really successful. But the trick is really putting the time in to find the audio clip that really nails it. Because, I'll give you an example from today. Trump was in NATO, as you probably all know, or most of you know, and made a bunch of really out there statements yesterday, brought the whole, we're going to overthrow Greenland thing, back. And even about Iran, there were multiple statements at multiple times, basically all saying the same thing, that I'm just giving up on them. We're going to, come back at them really, really hard. And so I already had one of those slated, recorded on my computer, ready to go. And then I was going through some other clips, and I found one where he just started listing war crimes that we are going to do if Iran doesn't cooperate. Talked about blowing up desalination plants, talking about, so people won't have drinking water, talking about blowing up bridges and all of these things. And to me, that's the key. The difference between just another quote of the president saying inflammatory things. We've heard that all before. But one thing, and Bob has heard me say this before, that I really try to keep in mind as a real history buff myself, what's the thing that in 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, 100 years, God willing, if we're still all here, well, not us, but if the country is still here, if historians still exist, if history is still recorded, human history, what will be the important things? And often the important things are not number one, number two on the New York Times and the BBC or whatever. Like a lot of times it's the third, fourth, fifth thing, or something that's not even in the homepage of most papers, that or news outlets, news agencies rather. So yeah, those are all things that I keep in mind. But I sort of got sidetracked. When I was working at DNA Info, the reason I was not just trying to puff up my resume, I remember at some point someone explaining to me the hierarchy of 100 lives in another country equal one American life. So, like, if an American is shot in New Jersey, that is going to trump 100 people dying in another part of the world. And I just reject that as a concept. I find that abhorrent. And again, if I try to see these headlines as like an opportunity to do it the way that I would like to do it. And I think Bob and I are very much on the same page in this kind of stuff. And he's been, just such a phenomenal person to work for and work with on all this stuff. But it shouldn't be that way. And all lives should have, if not equal importance, at least something a little closer. I understand that if two people are killed in Brooklyn and two people are killed in Nigeria, yes, okay. Brooklyn news is going to lead with Brooklyn, right? But we're the world news. We're looking at the globe. And I just think it's really important to, again, approach it from a humanist level. So I think that's all that I needed to say.
I did want to point out that
Please,
one of the
jump
things
in.
that, I do believe, having gone through reporting the pre 9/11 world and the post 9/11 world, that one can make an argument that we were so surprised by that attack because we were so disconnected as Americans to the situational awareness of the rest of the planet. And so I see that corporate news, as actually a civil defense problem, because it's not giving Americans a realistic situational awareness about the state of the planet. And so that is something where, and it's in the environmental reporting. And so that's another thread that kind of pulls this all together, is giving people a full 360, like checking in on what's happening in the Sudan. There are certain pressure points around the world that have been bleeding out for a long, long time. And we kind of look at that 24/7. And it doesn't often, they're not presenting in the top, and we're going to see this happen more and more as the consolidation of oligarch power continues with what's happening with CNN and the rest. So it really creates an essential role for us here to have a frame of reference. And to some degree, what I've been happy about is, after a period of somewhat alienation, you've seen Democracy Now! And Pacifica actually come together and work together. So an example would be on May of 2025, May 9th, we were advised by Pax Christi at Delaney Hall. That's before anybody knew where Delaney Hall was. This is a full many, many months before the tragedies in Minnesota with Minneapolis, St. Paul. We had a mayor abducted off a street, Mayor Ross Baraka, the mayor of the largest city in New Jersey, taken off of a public street, taken into custody by mass federal agents. And so we started that story from that period of time. The world caught up to us so that when Delaney Hall's hunger strikers went out, we were able to, because we'd continued that narrative every day, checking in. That local story found its way into the national and international broadcast, and we were able to lead it with Amy in a kind of united front. And so I would suggest to you that there are a million stories like that in all of our areas. Like the other thing we're looking to do, and that's why we did this elaborate thing with No Kings and involving 26 paid reporters with training, was the idea that there are stories exactly like that throughout the Pacifica network. And we're seeing it happen with fighting of the what's going on with data centers and what's going on with ICE, with fighting the detention camps. And so ultimately, what would similarly a potential project would be what's happening in your community related to the rolling back of healthcare. How often have you heard, as a throwaway line at the end of a reporting at Kaiser Health News or New York Times, 300 rural hospitals scheduled to close? Do you ever hear from a rural hospital that's closing?
Mm.
And so that's where I see we can really connect, and then having Jesse in this international setting presents a kind of a transistor connection. There's also several countries that are part of the Pacific Network. So that's my only interjection, but I wanted to have a forward-looking statement about what we could still accomplish together.
Thank you, Bob. And I just see that Marie said, for those who cannot afford to subscribe to a major news, are we able to broadcast news clips from ABC or The Guardian? I would say my understanding is that you have to ask permission to do that. And now that we have, uh, if you missed the opening, Marie, Jesse is making headlines for Pacifica that we can help you broadcast if you want to. And does
Well, that's
anyone
another thing
else?
I wanted to point out,
Yeah.
that we have also converted. One of the big problems is that increasingly, as new information is so important, whether it be trying to know how you're going to survive an extreme weather event, increasingly quality organizations are raising paywalls higher and higher. And so you're seeing that and one of the things we're committed to do, at least at BAI, is to create a firewall free access to news and information. And information and being informed should not be a class function. And so if you go to our website now, you'll see Jesse's global report is at the top. It's downloadable, it's free. And then there's dozens and dozens of news articles that are generated by what's happening on our air. And then at the bottom, a public news service ability. And all of that is free. All of that is, because to me, that's another crisis right now, is the gating off of information where being well informed is a function of your bank account.
And I know we have it available to put on people's websites, but I feel silly asking this, but is it in audio port?
Yes.
Yes.
It's,
Okay.
it's also available on most podcast platforms, including YouTube.
Okay. And what is it just called headlines in
In
audio port?
it's called it's got it's different names. Well, two different names. If it's a podcast, it is labeled 5-minute morning headlines with Jesse Lent.
With the number 5?
Yes.
Okay.
And if you go, and I'm just going into AudioPort now to make sure that I give you the correct name. In AudioPort, you can always find it just under Find Programming in the home view. The way AudioPort is set up, headlines will always go to the top of that home screen. You can also always find it in my AudioPort account, which is just Jesse Lent, Jesse space Lent. But it is labeled in AudioPort as Pacifica headlines.
Okay. Thank you. And Marie, did you have another question?
Sorry, I need another hand. um, I'm probably asking what you've already covered, but I guess I'm still a little uncertain about what we in republishing news Pacifica has. Is there a mechanism where, for instance, here in San Diego, we're right up against Tijuana, Mexico, so we might have a story about ICE, for instance. Is there a place where we could let Pacifica members know that we have some people who could be interviewed, who could speak to that?
Sure, absolutely.
And would there be other community stations saying, in our community such and such happened, if you want to interview anybody, let us know?
I think that Stephanie you can talk about the Ursula and how you work that, but what we did during the No Kings is we put an advisory out and then people participated and we created a framework. I mean, one of the things I'm working on now is a national teach-in around how people are dealing with ICE detention centers, because there's 20 communities now that have that's one example where there would be an opportunity for affiliates to hook up together and cross program. Similarly with what's happening with the resistance to this data centers. There's, and so we've also talked about an examination of what's happening in your community with healthcare, because we're seeing this collapse, these closures, and in real time. And so that, yeah, we'd be glad to we're wide open to that. I'm a GM at WBAI.org. And Jesse, we should probably put a mailbox for you, but for now, anything you have that you think we should know about, please let us know.
Yeah, we just
I have a WBAI email. It's jesse@wbai.org.
WBAI. Oh, New York, yeah. We just interviewed a member of the Samud Global Flotilla.
Sure.
And we haven't put that on audio port. See if I can get someone to do that. But how would then Stephanie, what would be the best way? Or should we let others know?
You can do both. You can, you can put it under actualities in audio port, and then you could make an announcement on the Pacifica announce, and or even the station managers, if you feel like it's, like a top news thing. I think just letting everyone know that what you've made. And to echo what Bob said, yes, we are all the big stations, the sister stations are working on creating a news structure where, like Bob said, if the protesting, we'll put out a call to see who's interested, and we'll kind of get finding stations who want to participate, and then stations who want to go next level and be available when another station wants to do an interview. Then we're working on having a process where we can put them on the next level, so then people can just network directly. So that's what we're working towards. And I see. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I don't know if anyone is as old as I am. I remember a program that came on that was something that was really new. It was called Monitor. And
Christian Science Monitor. Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yes.
And that was a great thing because there were reports that were coming from around the
global.
United States.
Yeah, and it was global too.
I remember the Monitor Weather Woman.
Really?
Say that again, David.
The Monitor Weather Woman. She had a very sexy voice.
Oh, I've forgotten that.
And the weather in such and such was super hot.
Before we move on, I just want to mention I see we're at 11:55 and I am free to keep going for whoever wants to say, but I know I want to check with Jesse the most because I want to see where you are. If you need to stop it at the end of the hour.
I can keep going as long as people want to hear the sound of my voice. I just wanted to add one thing, which is our wonderful web developer, Chris Lapuzza, has built this window, I believe you call it a widget, on the WBAI.org homepage that is the Pacifica headlines. It has a nice graphic and then includes the description that I write each day of what's in that report. That is something he can share with any station that wants to put it on their homepage. So you can get in touch probably through Bob. Bob, would it probably best to go through you, right?
Or me is fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we can, because I think he said it was somewhere in the neighborhood. I think he said 20 stations are thinking of picking it up, which is great. Right now, we're broadcast daily, at least according to Audioport, because obviously any engineer could just be taking it off of our homepage. But we're up to about a dozen stations a day that are taking it right now every hour.
That's great. Yeah,
I have to jump off and raise some money, but I wanted to thank you all for being part of this, and onward and upward. We've come a long way, and you've all been a big part of it. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you for contributing. It was very meaningful.
Thanks.
And Lauren, did you want to say something?
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
There we go. Yeah, sorry about that. I've been doing assignments for the KPFA newsroom. And Jesse, nice to make your acquaintance. I know we've emailed a couple times. It's been really great working with you, Jesse. So I wanted to just thank you so much. Over this last year with Pacifica and the sister stations, trying to create, how do we get more news on all of our partner and affiliate stations? And so between KPFA, WBAI, WPFW, having 3 daily headline packages, I hope has been a support for the affiliates. And shout out to Jesse. When we have holidays, union holidays, Jesse kind of covers all of our shifts. So we really appreciate you, Jesse, so we can get the rest we need and deserve in these turbulent times. I wanted to just speak really quickly to Marie in San Diego. So KPFA, we're in the Bay Area, but we simulcast on KPFK in Los Angeles and KFCF in Fresno. And in Humboldt County, KMUD, they don't simulcast our daily newscast. We have a 1-hour newscast at 6 and a bunch of individual reporter stories that make up that newscast. But they select the individual stories that they want to air that's relevant to their community. And Marie, seeing that you're in San Diego, we've been covering the developments with Core Civic, the detention center that just sold to the federal government. And so, Jesse and everyone here, I'm going to put it in the chat, but on our website, kpfa.org/news, anytime you all want to grab stories that are original reporting, the licensed content has been vetted, right? Like we can't just grab, I saw someone in the chat was asking about like ABC and stuff like that. You have to be really, really tricky because there are Creative Commons licensees, but you can only use, seconds, right, with attribution. But, with other nonprofit partners like C-SPAN, and, working with other reporters around the world, there's a way to still get the rich actualities. But anyway, so all the individual stories on our website are free for anyone to use as long as you're a Pacifica affiliate. Jesse, if you're ever short on news, which I doubt is ever the case, you're welcome to scope that. It has the 1-hour newscast, but then when you click on it, all the individual reports were highlighted. And so, we covered what happened with the ICE shooting in Texas. Today, we'll be looking at with the DEA agent. And then, of course, Marie, because we are based in California, we really cover a lot of state news. And so maybe we can connect through Ursula and see what a future, bolstering the California news looks like. So, but yeah, thanks everyone. Nice to meet you, Jesse.
Thank you,
Great to see Lauren. And I'll definitely keep that in mind. That's great to know.
Okay, so I don't know if did you have another bit that you wanted to focus on, Jesse?
Well, I mean, it's up to you. There is one thing I want to say. Basically what I was planning on doing for the rest of this was just actually sort of walking you through step by step what I do. I don't know if that's interesting to people. If it's not, I will not be offended. But
I
since
think
that
it
was
is. Yeah.
technically what I was asked to do, I can try to share my screen so I can show you like the audio editing software I use and stuff. But I wanted just really quickly to respond to the point that's been kicked around about what we're allowed to use and what we're not. It is my understanding, and this understanding is something I've researched a little bit and also comes from the rules when I worked for a commercial station briefly in Maine when I needed to be back with my folks a couple of years ago. Don't ever leave Pacifica, folks. We've got our problems, but man, when you go into commercial radio, it is a different ballgame. But even at a commercial station, right, who has different rules because they are not because they're making money, they claimed, and I believe the research I've done bears this out, that you are allowed to use raw footage. You just need to credit the news organization. And in the same way that you're allowed to use another person's article and simply say, according to the Washington Post. And if you listen to one of my 5-minute broadcasts, I am very aware of attribution. And the way that I handle scripting is I'm trying to look at as many reports that are offering different details. Sometimes I'll paste that copy on the page and then try to work it in a way that it is no longer plagiarism. So take a sentence from, well, not a sentence, but a fact from here, a fact from there, a fact from there, try to bring them together and then attribute, credit them in a way that hopefully doesn't throw off the flow of the newscast. Now, obviously, you cannot use like a news report that someone has filed. That is absolutely off limits. And you would, I believe news agencies would be in absolutely in the right to send you a cease and desist. But as far as like an explosion in, that was on social media in Iran, or the president giving talking to reporters at the White House, the rule that I understand is if it's basically on CNN, it's basically public domain. So I would still attribute it in that case, but I don't believe you technically need to. But if it is footage that is coming from the AP or from Reuters or from wherever, then you need to cite it. And it would be a very short clip. The longest clip I'll ever play is right around 30 seconds. But if you're talking about footage of an actual happening, it's usually around the 5-second mark, and I believe, so all the rules I just gave you are the rules for commercial radio. And I believe as a nonprofit listener sponsored radio station with not a lot of money in the bank, we have a sort of double layer of copyright protection, just in the sense that we're not trying to scoop CNN or start our own cable news station, right? And I think also, if for anyone who's hearing this and thinking, well, that can't be right, think about it from a news perspective, right? If you were not the editor, not even the managing editor, if you were like Sulzberg at the New York Times, if you were the higher up, what would you be more concerned about? That a station is using 10 seconds of your audio, or that the news business is dying, everyone is using AI for news, and no one is going to your site anymore? I would assume that it would be seen as a positive that we are sending people towards a news organization and saying, oh, this was where this story originated. Go to the New York Times for more, go to the AP for more, go to Reuters for more, go to Al Jazeera for more. And so that is, I'm pretty sure, the legal standing. And just one last thing about plagiarism. Like I said, I do my best to go through lengths as much as time will allow. And there is a time crunch, obviously, with doing these reports in the morning. But I will always rework stuff. When they trained me at the aforementioned commercial radio station, the kid who trained me literally just copied and pasted the story and said, oh, yeah, right here, CBS News says. That was their version of attribution. So in other words, everything is plagiarized word for word, and they just added CBS reports, So I think we're in okay shape.
So it sounds like
I
you
go
you
to
reword it.
I go to
100%.
but I go to each website and take a look at, and they all have a thing about copyright and permission, what you have to do for permission.
Well,
ABC
again,
and the rest of them.
I think that is if you're CBS, if you're NBC, if you're a competitor in the marketplace, there is a set of rules, right? If you are a 5-minute news broadcast using this and tiny bit of this and a tiny bit of that, again, as far as I can find, it's a little bit of a legal gray area, but I believe we are in the clear. I am not a lawyer, but everyone else that I've talked to about this and everything I've read makes it sound as that's the case. And tell me I'm wrong, but I wanted to be transparent about it because that is the way we've progressed, from day one, and have yet to hear even a peep about it.
Is that when you say legal, are you referring to like FCC rules?
I think it's a question of copyright rules, right? It's
Okay.
intellectual property. But again, it's not like, I know I refer everything to musical terms, but it's not like you wrote a song and someone is using that sound recording in a commercial. That's
Right.
not what's happening here. We are spotlighting your work and telling our listeners, here's who had this scoop,
Right. And I know in terms of my understanding from journalism schools, if you're referring to facts, like facts don't belong to anyone, and then you would just attribute it to who reported it first, I suppose.
Exactly.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
and that's all I want to be reporting anyway. I do, 5 minutes, you don't really have time to get into too much analysis anyway. But if there is analysis in any of my pieces beyond just the sort of base level of knowledge that any human would achieve just by doing this work every day, beyond that, if there is analysis, it's cited analysis. This person said this, So yeah, that's it for me. Do you want me to try to get into how I just go through the steps? We don't have to spend too much time. I'll just sort of walk you through a step by step.
I think it would be great. And if anyone needs to drop off, that's fine. And we will have it on recorded. So I think that's a win-win.
All right. I'm going to try to share my screen. Tell me.
Okay.
Tell me if this works. It's telling me I have to go into my system settings. Okay, I am going into my system. Okay, actually, I'm going to have to quit and reopen. So just give me 1 second. Okay.
You bet.
Well, he's gone. The free news that we get is all the right wing, really, really extreme stuff. So that's going out to people that are being indoctrinated, basically.
The free, right, like the YouTube self-appointed
Podcast
commentator. I know, and they speak with such a voice of authority too,
yes,
borrowed authority that they
real
don't.
Hyperbole and intensity.
Yeah, and it's effective.
Okay, tell me if this works. Are you seeing my computer right now?
Yes, sir.
Excellent. All right, great. So, actually, why don't I won't go into the audio software just yet. I'll show you sort of where I get some of this stuff. So, because so much of the world is focused in the Middle East right now with Iran and the various places that Israel's bombing, there is, I usually start with Al Jazeera. And that's a habit I got into back when we were just doing the Iran war. Al Jazeera I just think they're highly underrated as a news source because they have so many local sources in the field. They have people fluent in so many different languages. And yes, they are partially owned by the Qatari government, but every time, and I always do my due diligence to the best of my ability, I've never been burned by them once. I remember on the first day of the war, Al Jazeera was the first place I saw it reported that Khamenei had died when the Western media, was not running with that story at all. And I was like, okay, well, there's no way that Al Jazeera has this story and the AP doesn't have it and the Times doesn't have it. Well, that was exactly what it was. They have just ironclad sources and do just tremendous reporting. So this sort of breaking segment here is a great just ticker of so many stories. And what's great too is they'll refer you back to US stories, and a lot of times it's just a statement from one article that might have fallen through the cracks. Like, there are a lot of times that I've been informed about US news, especially if it's a news story, a breaking story, through Al Jazeera. And to give you an idea about their reach, for example, I don't know if you've heard about this building that might collapse in Manhattan. Al Jazeera is reporting on that story on a New York building. So their reach is really impressive. So what I usually do, I start my day, I go up here into video at Al Jazeera, and I look at what they got. Now, a lot of these are going to have music on them, and anything with music I can't use because we don't have a soundtrack for the Pacifica headlines. And so I will usually scroll through and just try to find anything that looks like it really could belong in. I don't even want to say it looks like it belongs. I look at anything that looks like it's major. Pacifica headlines, we're not looking at much cultural stuff with very rare exceptions. We're not looking at, say, what's going on in the World Cup, I mentioned it when New York City won with the Knicks because it was such a big national story. But generally, sports, entertainment, those aren't the kinds of things we're going to look at. Now, one thing that Al Jazeera has that's so fantastic, why I love it so much, is they provide a lot of clips with translations. I'm going to see if that's an example here. This is Iran's foreign minister urges BRICS states to condemn U.S.-Israeli aggression. Let's just hit play and see what happens. Okay, so here you can hear there's music, right? Sometimes I'll skip ahead and see, oh, wait, is it?
Why ready to fight with everything we have
stopped
in defense of our freedom and our soil? We are equally ready to pursue and defend diplomacy. As I have repeated.
So, yeah, in that case where Arakchi is speaking in English, I would listen to the whole thing. And if it was, I feel like if it at least had a good chance of being included in the broadcast, I text myself a link. And then I also keep, am I at all, can you see my face at all? Is it just the screen or am I in the corner too?
We can see you.
Okay, great. Because I'm just holding this up. This is my running work notebook here. I'm an old freehand guy, but I don't know if you can see that, but I will just write out very quickly a slug kind of a thing. Iran, you see Trump 1, Trump 2, and then to the right, the source. Very important, so that the source is always, always, always included. Okay, so, and one thing I will say, this is an hour easily. This is a big amount of time that it takes to do this, but it's worth it. Not only are the audio clips the sort of heartbeat of Pacifica headlines, I think it's what makes it unique, like Bob was saying before, but also by listening to the complete clips, you're informing yourself. A lot of times I'm able to do a more informed broadcast. I would say more times than not, a vast majority of the time, I'm able to produce a more informed, a better informed broadcast because I've listened to all these speeches, right? I'm not reading in the New York Times about something that Arakchi said where they picked one line. Well, That was what that one journalist thought you should hear. And besides, I'm sure you all have observed this in news. A lot of times, one line from a speech will be in like 20 different articles, right? And I think a big part of that is, as someone that's been on deadline, when you're on deadline, you don't always have time to go into the source material and very carefully go through each line. And that still happens to me. I mean, that Aragchi clip, I think, was 2 minutes long. What do you do in a case like today where Graham Plattner posts an 11-minute video to X about why he's leaving the race? Like, we know that Plattner speech has to make it somewhere into the broadcast. This is historic news. This is a Senate, primary winner dropping out because of sexual assault allegations, rape allegations. So what do you do? Well, in cases like that where it's a big block, I often just try to get lucky. If it's something where I think there's real gold in there, I'll try to find a written transcript and read through it quickly and then skip to that spot, But otherwise, sometimes I'll also do a trick where I'll find, I'll sort of jump around and try to find the clip that everyone's using and then go back, say, 30 seconds or a minute before it and listen a minute after and see, because sometimes the line right before someone says something completely changes the meaning of that thing, right? So, it says right in the description, if you go to WBAI.org, it says right here, right from the newsroom of WBAI in New York City, Pacifica Headlines provides a 5-minute rundown of the most important stories from around the world. Then priority is given to subjects that may be underreported in mainstream news coverage. Now, that doesn't just apply to the stories themselves, but actually the source material of those stories. Like sometimes there's something that just no one's really, that isn't getting any traction. Marie, I see you have your hand up. Did you want to say something, Marie? I think you're muted.
If you're drawing from different sources, what does your attribution look like?
Everything is attributed, always, without exception.
So
and multiple times if it's multiple things, right?
But then is it a list of news outlets?
So you haven't heard the 5-minute news broadcast?
No.
All right, well, this is a good thing to do. Let's listen to just like the first couple minutes of today's broadcast, okay? Here we go. From across the nation and around the world, for Pacifica Headlines, I'm Jesse Lent. Footage released by Iran, they say, shows missiles being launched at U.S. bases and strategic centers in Bahrain, Kuwait, and Qatar after the U.S. bombed Iranian cities for a second consecutive night, according to Al Jazeera. The AP reports that, according to Iranian officials, the strikes were in response to, quote, U.S. aggressions and breach of commitments. The U.S. attacks have killed 14 people and wounded 78 in the past 2 days, with blasts reported in several Iranian cities along the Strait of Hormuz, Iran's health ministry said today. The head of the International Maritime Organization, Arsenio Dominguez, tells NBC News that roughly 6,000 sailors remain trapped around the Strait of Hormuz. Speaking from the NATO summit in Ankara, Turkey yesterday, President Donald Trump threatened attacks on civilian infrastructure within Iran.
I would say in one day we knocked down every single bridge in Iran. There's not a thing they can do about it.
Note how this is longer than most clips we hear of the president these days.
Electric plants where they make their electricity in there. We have to, we'll take them out. I don't want to do that, but if we have to, we'll take them out. They have desalinization plants. We'll take them out if we have to. I hate to do that. That's probably the one I would like not to do least. We attacked Carg Island last night. We knocked out a piece. I said, don't touch the oil because maybe we'll take over Carg Island.
But many Iranians, like these two men interviewed yesterday by the news agency Reuters, say they will never give in to U.S. demands.
He can't do anything. We will stand until the end of our lives.
So there you go. And obviously, if you want to hear the rest, go to WBAI.org. But so everything is attributed. And a really good example is the opening there. That was footage released by the Iranian government, so public domain, but and several news sources had it, but both Al Jazeera and the AP are mentioned because I have sort of squashed their reporting together. Al Jazeera had a list of all the areas that the U.S. had attacked, and the AP had they were the ones who cited the source of the casualties. So yeah, when I first started this job, I made a big post-it note on my desk that just said cite sources. I mean, I am, because we don't want to end up in the wrong side of any of this stuff, and we know like how hard it is to do good reporting. So the people that are doing good reporting, I always want to highlight it. We always want to spotlight them, rather. I mean, if time allowed in the broadcast, I'd mention journalists by name, but I don't think it would really work for the format of this broadcast. But on We Decide, the show I produce with Bob, which I think someone asked, that is absolutely in Audioport. We Decide, America at the Crossroads with Jenna Flanagan. It's a 2-hour show, but it's in Audioport as hour 1 and hour 2. So and both have an independent introduction, so you can you can broadcast those either together or separately. I think someone might have just asked a question. Oh, there it is. Let's see. Unreported.
Yeah, I see Bruce put something in the chat there. Do you want to comment on that, Bruce? Whoops.
Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, can you hear me
Yeah.
now?
Yeah,
Bruce.
Yeah, I mean, Jesse's absolutely right. American news is so ignorant across about anything outside of the U.S. It's like, it's unbelievable. And I'll give you an example. Like, even when you're talking about gas prices, people go like, oh, the gas price. Well, yeah, but what they're not covering is like what's happening in other parts of the world, like the Philippines, where they have no gasoline and people are going to work 4 days a week, and you can only buy, so many gallons of gasoline. And Australia ran out of jet fuel for a while, and they had to go beg to get some from China. So it's not just like the price at the pump; it's like the follow-on effects. Another example is like when they bombed that linear natural gas train that produces liquefied natural gas. They took out the helium production facility. So now there's a huge crisis in terms of the price of helium, which you need for MRI and a whole bunch of other things. Yes. But anyway, what I was going to say, and Jen's absolutely right. Al Jazeera, is tops. Even Hillary Clinton, when she was Secretary of State, at one point was quoted saying it was the most accurate news that she reads every day. She got into trouble for it. But,
can't catch a break.
Yeah, you got groundnews.com. I don't know if you've used it, but it's handy to cover the stories that didn't get onto the mainstream page. And it's the old story of like, censorship is simply not covering the story. So like nobody knows about it. But groundnews.com, and it gives you a left, right, needle, but it'll cover a whole bunch of stories, and you go like, oh. I mean, because otherwise you're not going to see it. The other thing that's really interesting is like if you go to the B&E and Telenews story, Venezuela asked UK to release Bank of England gold. I'm like, okay, what's that all about? Well, oh, you mean the Bank of England has all of Venezuela's gold and they're refusing to release it?
Right.
Hello, and they're still refusing to release it. So yeah, but
that's actually great. I don't know about Ground News. I've added that to my list of potential sources. So thank you for that tip. This is a great example of a story that would be in the Pacifica headlines, but is on its face an economic story, to go back to what I was saying at the beginning, but it's an economic justice story. Really, it's this absurd thing that all these assets. I'm not an expert on this story, but from what I understand, as Bruce was saying, that the Bank of England is holding all of this money of Venezuela's that could be going into the relief efforts. And so exactly that, like as Bob said, it's there are times to focus on the economic aspect. It's just not the thing of like, oh, it's always got to go back to how much money it is, what is this going to cost me? And I loved your example of gas prices, Bruce, because it's so true. And P.S. OPEC sets prices like 6 months in advance. And yes, things like a war on the main strait where a third of the world's energy passes through can affect those prices, but it's it's a broad constellation of factors, as with many stories, that gets dumbed down and dumbed down. And then people get infuriated because they think, oh, well, the answer must be simple because they've been told that it's simple. And it really is a shortcoming of of American news. And I will say, talking to Europeans, there is much more of an openness to the idea that issues are complicated with multiple factors, where a lot of Americans, they just don't want to hear that. And I think a lot of that comes back to cable news, of like the blood sport that every issue becomes. And here's a guy who's going to argue one side, and the person next to him is going to vehemently argue the other side. And you finish the segment and you don't even know what's true anymore. You feel like you've just been, had a minor lobotomy. I have been saying for years that the people who are the most adamantly arguing about something, the most viciously arguing about any issue, 9 times out of 10, they are also the least informed about that issue. Because once you get into the issues, and this goes, we're the ones who they're learning about these issues, right? We're the news. So once you actually go and look at them, as as any of us who do news have to do, you realize how nuanced things are. And not everything has most things don't have an easy fix, or it would be done. And even more often than not, there are so many factors going into it. And that is just not at all an aspect of so much news coverage in the effort, right, to provide a product that is appealing to people. That's one thing we haven't talked about.
There's also an economic aspect to this. Talking heads are much cheaper than running an international news organization, even if you use a stringer. So you look at WAPO, recently canned all of their Ukrainian and Eastern European staff, and now I don't know how they're covering it. Just have a chuckle for the day. Google, there was a screenshot of the rock band playing at the State Fair concert where the guy was wearing sunglasses. And in his sunglasses, you could see a reflection of the field where there was like no people. So Fox had the original screenshot of him and his female companion singer. People picked up the reflection, and a half hour later, he was gone and the sunglasses were gone. And I mean, they're just unbelievable. You got the 4 of them on a panel sitting in front of the empty field saying, like, oh, I went down there and was crushed. It was a crush. And I was like, come on, you can't make it up.
Yeah.
The Fox reporter from the other day who is standing in front of the reflecting pool, which is clearly green, saying, people are saying this reflecting pool is green. I mean, I don't know where they're coming from when the reflecting pool is behind him and very, very green. It's like a who you going to believe, me or your lion eyes kind of scenario.
And I don't want to go too much into a tangent, but also the current news people are obsessed with the horse race of it all.
Yes.
And that drives everything. And also, I think that the blue state, red state thing doesn't help anyone except politicians and news people. I think it's very harmful to all of us.
I'm so glad you brought up elections. The way that elections are covered might be the most flagrant example of news malpractice in America that I can think of. Right. At what point? I mean, we start seeing polls, 3 years ahead of the next presidential election.
Yeah.
At what point do we actually talk about substance? At what point do we engage in conversation that would allow the kind of candidates that can engage complicated issues of having some kind of success. And this is again a very much an American problem, the way that we cover elections. And yeah, I mean, one of the ways that I do my best to get around that is by focusing on races after they happen, right? The advantage is there's so much news every day. It's not like I'm struggling and I've got to stir something up because I have 24 hours to fill. I have 5 minutes to fill. So once the election happens, then we'll go in and see it. But yeah, I mean, God, I could do a whole hour just on the problem with the way that elections are covered. Let's see. I'm seeing. Okay, ground news is excellent. Someone supporting Bruce's suggestion. I will definitely check them out. Page 6 for politics. Yes. Okay, great. Thank you, Bruce. Okay, so just in the interest of keeping everything moving, I'm going to jump into, okay, so we've gone to Al Jazeera. Hopefully we found a couple things. My next stop on the morning tour is oops, sorry about that. Is to go to YouTube. All the major news agencies have YouTube accounts. And the main three that I deal with are the AP, Reuters, and Agence France Presse, AFP. And so let's see, let's go to Reuters. Something that Reuters does, getting back to Bruce's comment, because 100% yes, news bureaus around the world are closing. It's again a reason why Al Jazeera is so great is they have people in the field, and so does Reuters. And Reuters also provides a lot of translations. I was starting to say something about this before. It's occurred to me when I have a written like subtitles that I could actually provide the translation, but it just seems strange to me. It doesn't seem like it should be the newscaster's place to do that. It just seems, I don't know. I'm still working on how to do that. So for the short term, any clips that, yes, obviously, one, don't have music, and two, have translations are great. And of all the great reporting that Reuters does, I think probably my favorite thing that they do, and you heard it just in that at the very end of the clip of the headlines that we just heard, they interview regular folks on the ground. And there's that line by is it the Iranian director of Enola? Hold on one second. I'm just going to bring up this line because it very much it very much sums up. She just passed away recently. Let's see. Wait, hold on one second. If I can't find this, I will abandon this quest. Yes, here it is. Right. Okay. Thank you for bearing with me. I found it. I just have to. It's on a page where I am. Persepolis. I'm sorry. It's the director of an Iranian film, and she also did a cartoon called Persepolis, and it says. Okay, hold on one. Here it is. Yes, here it is. So her name is Marjane Satrapi, and the quote is, if I have one message to give to the secular American people, it's that the world is not divided into countries. The world is not divided between East and West. You are American. I am Iranian. We don't know each other, but we talk together and we understand each other perfectly. The difference between you and your government is much different than the difference between you and your government is much bigger than the difference between you and me. And the difference between me and my government is much bigger than the difference between me and you. And our governments are very much the same. That is exactly the way that I feel.
Whoa.
And the more that we can get the voices of, say, in this case, Iranians on the ground, people in Gaza, people experience Ebola in Africa, in the Congo, that to me, if I had to put my finger on the one thing that I want this broadcast to be and to do, that's it, is to demonstrate this quote. Because when people hear people talking with, and they can understand them, it's not just a scary foreign language with no with no translation. When they hear what they're saying, even if they're saying things that are anti-American, I think certainly my own experience is you realize how close we are to each other. So, okay, to skip forward, I will have found, I usually have somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 clips, maybe 6, 7, 8, narrow it down to 3. And once I start writing my script, it usually becomes clear which clips I'm going to use. So as I showed you before, I've written out the clips that I have. And now comes the time to put them into my system. Now, a quick second about gear. I am a recording engineer, producer on top of the radio stuff. So the gear that I'm working with is more advanced than what you would need for this job. But I will say, I think there is a real underutilized intersection between music production and radio production. And so many of the tricks that I've learned in recording music, like how to use compression and limiting in order to, get a good sound and balance the signal, how to edit effectively, even things like a de-esser, which, they use them to take out the P's and the S's for vocalists. That can actually be great in a voiceover. There's one that I use every day. So just to give you a quick rundown, maybe the best thing to do is I'll just sort of turn my camera around and point it down. Okay, that little silver box thing, and those are my monitors right there, the white things. That is a digital interface, a digital 4-track, a sort of industry standard, expensive piece of gear. So I'm using a very high-tech interface with about the lowest tech system of connecting the audio. Now, there are YouTube to MP3 converters you can use. I don't really want to recommend any because a lot of them, there's spam that they have. If they're free, a lot of them get shut down for obviously copyright fears that if you can take anything off YouTube and turn it into an MP3, you can steal music, etc. What I have is, and I'm happy to talk to anyone who's trying to work a similar low cost option out, but just, again, to breeze through all this stuff so you know what we're working with. This is a Frankenstein thing I figured out myself, where this is a input, an RCA input, so a single RCA, which I added a 1/4-inch adapter to, and it is an RCA to 1/8-inch adapter, so like an old Walkman adapter or old, something you might put into a 10-year-old laptop. On top of that, I have a adapter for a phone. I plug this into my phone. I play YouTube on my phone. I plug this end into the interface, and that's how I record the clips. And this comes in handy because there's YouTube to MP3 converters, but there's nothing that can convert an Al Jazeera video to MP3. Al Jazeera does have a YouTube channel also that sometimes has different stuff. I visit that as well. But this is quicker. It's also great for live things, when things are happening live, if we're covering an election or something, when we really need to run with a quote, like election night, the last time when the night Mamdani won, Mikey Sherrill clinched really early, and we were able to go to her speech. We couldn't go right away to it, but 5 minutes, hours before it was up on YouTube. So I would advise you to come up with some way if you're going to do this, or someone at your station is going to do this, to run their phone or their computer something into audio port. And I will say I have limited experience using it. There is a program called Audio Hijack that allows you to play audio anywhere on your computer, and then record it in a digital editing software. The fact that I do this, and I haven't really investigated further because I like this system, when I play the footage into my computer, I also have to listen to it again. And as I'm doing it, one, I'm trying to pick which 3 I'm going to use, if it is going to be 3, or if it's more, or if it's 2, if it's 5. And then secondly, it's enabling me to figure out where I'm going to cut, because I'm listening to it again. And sometimes I'll even just go ahead and write down, 32 seconds in to 54 seconds or whatever. Okay, so once we have
Marie, did you have a question about recording in real time? Did he answer that? Whoops, sorry.
I'm not sure if you're what did I say? If you're recording from one device to another,
yeah,
are you doing that in real time?
Yes. And that's what I meant, is that because it's in real time, if you do like a YouTube to MP3 converter, right? It just, you see the thermometer go across the screen and it's done, and then the MP3 shows up. One of the advantages I've found to doing it this way, where, what you're seeing right now is the editing software I use. And basically, like this Iran missile track, I just engaged the track, I plugged my phone in, and then I hit play on my phone, and it would be, we'd hear, the footage. That's the track that we heard that opened the broadcast. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I'll get all these clips in here, and I always use the same audio file because the news broadcast itself has an expiration date every day, right? And so we have that MP3. We don't need the raw footage anymore. And so by by just changing it every day in the same session file, I'm able to keep all the effects that I've added on my voiceover track. And also the theme music I have in the right places. I need to move it around a little at the end, but that's the theme music. And oops, that was also the voiceover. That's just the theme music. And, I will say this program we're working in is called Reaper, and it is completely free to use. I'm actually going to buy a license just because I've used it so much over the last 15 years. I think the license is around $60 for non-professional use, a couple $100 for professional use.
Is that like a one shot or once a year?
A one shot. Yeah,
Okay.
But you don't need to pay. You can download Reaper, Reaper, and their website is reaper.fm. I'm just saying that because I've recommended this to people and they've said, they didn't even have a .com. I don't think I found the right place. It's reaper.fm. You just go there. It'll ask you what kind of computer you have. You just download the right kind for your computer, and you can immediately go in and start playing around in this program. It's a wonderful program. I went to school at Emerson College for studio recording, so I know how to use a pretty wide variety of software, Pro Tools, and, when I was at WBAI, they use Audacity, so I learned Audacity. But taking Audacity, for example, which so many people in radio use, it's kind of a terrible program, really. It's very unuser friendly. It's all that toolbox, and you've got to know the toolboxes. The thing about Reaper that's great is how user friendly it is. If you want to create a track, Command T, that's a new track. You want to delete that track, you hit delete. If let's see, if you want to make an edit, you move the cursor to where the edit is and you hit the letter S, and now it's gone. Do you want to undo that edit? Control Z. Now it's back. So it's very sort of idiot proof. And I highly, highly recommend it. And as you can see, that one of the reasons that I won't bore you with all the reasons, all the things I love Reaper, why it's my favorite. But one thing I will say is, you know, as opposed to Audacity, where everything's kind of compressed, I feel very claustrophobic using that program. Here, you can really see everything, right? And so, like, one thing that, just to give you an example of how I use that capacity, I always spend a lot of time, or as much as I can afford to spend, on exactly where the sound falls. So, like, finessing where this clip comes out of there, you know, that took a few tries. So I might, okay, let's try it while the music's still going on. Yeah, the music's kind of coming over it. Well, what happens if we wait till the music's all the way done? Yeah, that's not as exciting. So by having this view, you really can float everything around. And so I would highly recommend, even if you feel like it's a bit out of your pay grade, I highly recommend that maybe tonight even, or I know it's still afternoon where you are, maybe this afternoon, maybe today's the day. Don't put off what you could do today. If you download it and mess around with it, you actually don't even need an audio interface, which a lot of digital editing software requires you to have that silver box thing I had. And all a digital interface is, if you don't know, and apologies if you do, I don't mean to lecture you on something you already know about, but all a digital interface is it allows you to plug a microphone or a guitar or a phone into your computer and now have that be recorded within the program we're looking at. So, like, you engage the track, you and then you plug it in and then you record it, and here, actually, let me just do it really quickly to show you. So I'm taking this 1/4-inch cable, I'm putting it in the back of the interface. Oh, actually, well, yeah, actually. And okay. And so let's say that I was doing one of my tracks. I would Control T. Here's a new track. I would record, engage it, and let's see what do we do? Let's see. Well, this is how I get music, for example, right? So let's say that I was recording music for We Decide even. So basically, yeah, I don't know why that's not. Hold on. Oh, there it is. And so as you can see, it showed up in here, and I would just hit record. And now we are recording that music. If I needed the level to be higher, that's the kind of thing you can adjust in your on your interface. So you can crank it up a little there. You can turn it way down if it's too loud. And then once you have enough, then you hit stop and then hit record. See, and since my microphone was plugged in, you can hear me talk too. That music, if I needed your on your interface a little there, you can turn it way down. Oh, huh. A little there. That's strange. I think Zoom might be wreaking a little bit of havoc on my.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a lot for it all to take both of all those sounds.
Actually, hold on. Let me try this one more time just to. There's always a little troubleshooting in this kind of thing. Okay, yeah, and actually I'm used to dealing with just one track when I do this at a time, so it was just that I needed to engage the other track. And so there you go. I had the wrong track engaged in here when you are. So I have my mic in track 1 in the interface. I know this can kind of blow your hair back if you're not used to this audio stuff. Promise you, it's less scary than it seems.
Yeah, we actually had another guy from the West Coast. He's a big fan of Reaper too, and he did a session on that.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do a
He's
tutorial if that's something that
yeah,
people,
we would
you
love
know.
it for
Yeah, it's
sure.
very easy to use. And because it's free, there are tons of tutorials in YouTube on it. Pretty much anything you could think of, from the most basic stuff to the most advanced stuff. And I know, like I said, I've been using the program for like 15 years. Um, you can find it all in YouTube pretty much.
That's
And
great.
so just to talk about what I was doing wrong before I had the number one engaged, which is where my mic is, and I just needed to engage number two, and because that was the input where I plugged in my music. But it brings up a really good point, which is I would say if anyone in this thread or anyone that works at your station is going to use this kind of thing, the one thing I would say is get a system that makes sense to you. I'm all for having the nicest gear that you can get, but there are times in the morning when I got to file the report. It's due in 30 minutes and suddenly something's acting weird on here. Being able to keep the presence of mind to stay focused and still, fix whatever's going wrong is something that certainly takes a level of understanding. So I would say, start simple. But and for anyone who's wondering, this microphone, which probably looks familiar to people, is a sort of radio and podcast industry standard. It's the Shure SM7B, and it's just a wonderful microphone. And it's a few $100s depending on where and when you get it, 300, $400, but totally worth it. It makes voices sound very silky, and the thing that it is very much known for is it's very directional, which is to say it picks up just this sort of area right here. And when I first moved into this apartment where I am, they were doing a bunch of construction upstairs. I was able to file reports even once when there was hammering going on right there. But the one thing I will say, and this is the last technical thing I promise, if you buy an SM7B, you'll need this. It's called a cloud lifter. And it's because the reason the mic is able to tune out all that extra sound is because it's a very low signal. And this boosts the signal. So as just a funny aside that people might appreciate, I actually was able, 10 years ago when I started at WBAI to talk them into upgrading to SM7Bs, but they ended up sending them back. I hadn't been there when they arrived, and the engineers plugged them in and said, oh yeah, they were too quiet because they forgot to order the the cloud lifter. And I said, wait, you mean you didn't order the cloud lifter? So the reason we don't have SM7Bs is because they sent them back without Googling what they need. But I probably should have told them right away that they needed a cloud lifter. Anyway, I digress. Just really quickly, and we'll be able to wrap up by the end of the hour, just a couple quick things. So now we'll have all the audio is here. Then it's time to write the script. So I keep a Google Doc going, and each one of these is saved and emailed to Bob every day. And that way, if I need to refer back to something I've already done, I can go, oh, wait, I think I talked about this on Tuesday. Although usually I'll just rewrite it, even if it's something I've covered before, because I'm always trying to make it as fresh as possible. It's like the sign off and the goodbye is the same. It's always, I'm Jesse Lent, from across the nation and around the world. For Pacifica Headlines, I'm Jesse Lent. And then at the end, those are the Pacifica Headlines. For the Pacifica Network, I'm Jesse Lent. And those were both Ursula created tags. So theoretically, right, I could be in the audio file and just use the same one every day. But again, anything I can do, I come from a long line of OCD people, people who would not have been able to listen to me talk for 2 hours, that's for sure, and so, and probably hard enough, maintaining my mom's attention for 2 minutes. It's probably how I ended up in radio. But it's anything I can do to make it different every day, to make it feel fresh, to make it feel not like a news broadcast that you've heard a million times. That is what I try to do. So again, writing the thing, I'll usually, depending on what kind of news day it is, and by this point, going through all the clips, I sort of have an idea. And that is an interesting kind of inside out way of learning the news, because sometimes things are big but don't have audio, although 9 times out of 10, what audio is available tends to tell the story of that news day. And usually I'll do about 3 at a time. Yes, Marie Johnson. Marie, just got your question. I am recording in real time. I understand that with Reaper, I understand that in Reaper with a recording, you can edit in real time, increasing volume, etc. I lost some of your audio. I don't know if you talked about that. We will talk about editing in Reaper in just a second. And again, I'm going to keep it really quick. I know that we're way over time. So thank you so much for that question, Marie. That's a great thing to ask about. So again, just to bring up, usually the thing that I've really learned from doing this, and the way I try to think about it, like, I don't want to go to the New York Times, right? I want to go to the sources that the New York Times is getting things from. And it's crazy that even at a world-class paper like the Times, if you look at the top of the story, a lot of AP stories are on the Times, and so, obviously, WBAI does no longer, for I believe around 15 years, hasn't had a news staff, like a news division, right? Like a newsroom. But in this era of shrinking, news sources, look at what happened to the Washington Post. A lot of editors at very big publications don't have really like a news staff certainly as they did. And so a lot of them are doing a similar thing to what I'm doing. So I'll go to AP News and see what's there, see what the big stories are. I'll go to Reuters. I'll use the Times. And the Times is good because the Times, if you add that as reported in the New York Times, it has a certain power and gravitas that I think a lot of a certain type of person, I might fall into that category myself, certainly before I was doing this work, would say, oh, okay, the Times is reporting it. But a lot of times with the Times or the Washington Post, I'm looking for things that might not be in the news agencies. And then I'm also looking for things, I'm looking to see what's at the top. Like, what does the Times think the top story is, And so, and I work hard not to say, okay, well, I've got to lead with this because I have audio from that. I've really never had to do that yet, and I hope I don't ever have to do that. Seeing another question. Maria asked, do you say the word quote each time you recite a quote? No, but I identify who's saying it and who they said it to every time. Oh, thank you, Radio Asheville, expressing your gratitude. I really appreciate it. It's great to talk to you all. So I think, Marie, probably the best way to answer that question, just again, bringing up my script from today. Okay, so let's see. Yeah, this is a really good example of how I handle it. I'll write, yesterday, President Trump told the AP that he would allow negotiations to continue, though he said he didn't see much point. They can talk, but I think they're wasting their time, Trump said. So I'll identify the news source and then the person. For things that are pretty flagrant, I actually got pushback from a guest who I will not give out the name of, but a guest on We Decide, hearing the broadcast, heard me quoting one of the Iranian officials, probably Ghalibaf or maybe Pezeshkian, one of the main negotiators, talking about Israel's genocidal war on Gaza. Now, the UN's called it a genocide, so I didn't it didn't even really register. But because it was an anti-Israel sentiment, and because I wasn't playing a clip, I was reading it in my own voice. I felt that that guest was right to flag me, and it's something that I've paid a lot of attention to. That it's not like it's not something. It's not the same, right? That it's still my voice saying it. So I have to be aware of that. And so in cases like that, where it's kind of on the border, I will add end quote to make sure that people know on both sides. So I'll say the person said, quote, blah, 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 blah. So I guess to answer your question, sometimes I will use quote. It depends, you know. A lot of this too is massaging it into language that flows okay in a broadcast, right? So okay, so as I've gone on, I've realized that my runtime is around a page per minute, give or take. And so I try to shoot for around 5 pages. Some days I'm up to 7, but that means I'm going to cut some stuff. And usually it's like 5 pages. If the quotes are short, if the clips rather are short, I can get away with it. But usually like 5 pages is like around a minute of audio I can sneak in. But if it's a lot, sometimes it's more like 4.5. If I only have 2 clips, maybe closer to under a minute, then I can get into the 5-6 page zone. But you know, it's different for everyone at the speed that you go. So then once I've got the script, I'm going into Reaper. I've got my SM7B engaged. I use the same Reaper one every day, right? I use this same file as I mentioned. And the reason for that, I'm going to show you. So I would go in and I would delete my audio. And actually I would delete all of this audio from yesterday when I was, setting things up. But and I'm not going to go into too much detail here. I think it's just a few of us left, but just to sort of let you know that this stuff helps, I'm just going to show you the effects in Reaper that are on my voice. It's 4:4. So we have a de-esser. That's the thing I told you about. Handles the P's and the S's. We got the brick wall compressor that basically says no level above this, just in case I really jump and my voice gets loud for a second. And then these are compressors, which just kind of help fatten the sound and place it well. And sometimes I go in and tweak these, but that's a bit advanced. We don't need to get into that. And then the last thing I'll say, just with delivery, and then I'll just very quickly end with editing. But a big challenge is, so I've done all this stuff. We've gotten to this point. A lot of times it's like noon for me at a broadcast that I need to deliver by 12:30 when I start my voiceover. So that's a lot of pressure. That is intense, right? But what I try to remember is that there's people who do this live on the air, right? When I had to do that when I worked at that commercial station. So now what I do is just go in and record all the audio and then edit it. It's kind of more fun to do it in stages, but it's too time consuming. But the main thing I'm thinking of, and when I redo the same line a few times, it's really like relaxed, like a voice that is approachable, like a voice that you want in your home. Not this wooden game show host, and this is the news kind of voice. I mean, I have a booming voice naturally, was always told to use my indoor voice my whole life. So I guess some of that is there's nothing I can do about it. But I'm not putting any English on that, so to speak. Like I'm not trying to sound like this. I mean, I'm varying my inflection again, but I'm trying to I'm trying to throw out everything that they tell you about how you're to deliver a news broadcast or news copy and just deliver it like a person who wants you to receive this information. And then once I do that, it's really just a question of listening back. Actually going to redo this and just, last thing I'll show you here is just, I'm going to just peel back one of these edits and just show you that, sometimes you got to do it a few officials. The strikes were in response to, quote, U.S. aggressions and breach of commitments. The U.S. attacks have killed 14 people and wounded 78 in the past 2 days, with Blasphemy said today. the head of the International.
That was pretty good. Let me try to find a mistake here. It's got to be around here somewhere.
President Donald Trump threatened attacks on civil. Speaking from the NATO.
Well, anyway, I will try it.
NATO summit in on threatened attacks on civilian infrastructure within Iran.
You know, I'm listening for it to be smooth. Oh, and this is the and then I'm making edits, lining it up, moving these clips around where they need to be. And then I totally lost my train of thought. But yeah, that's basically it. Looks like we have a question. Yeah. Marie says, I'm Walter. Yeah, Dan Rather, Murrow. Yeah,
Walter
I love it.
Cronkite.
Yeah, and exactly. And, I was looking at some Murrow stuff for this to prepare for this because I was thinking about playing some of his stuff to make the point at the top. And I had forgotten. I mean, obviously because of the time period, but he started in radio. All those reports from World War II, D-Day, etc. He was CBS radio long before he was a news anchor. And something else that stood out to me is how poetic his reporting was. There was something where he was talking about, missiles being fired and it looking like a bunch of glitter on a velvet, a velvet piece of velvet or something. It was the kind of talk that you don't usually hear in news. And to me, that goes back to the same idea, which is, we don't have to follow the same rules that all these news people have. And I did remember the last thing I was going to say. I do spend a lot of time and energy and effort pronouncing things correctly. And I go into, it's very easy. Just Google how to pronounce da-da-da-da. And even a very obscure Lebanese town, for example, they will give you the phonetic spelling. It's not hard to do. So few people do it. I mean, even on big CNN reports, PBS NewsHour, I hear people mispronounce stuff, and it's like, why? You just need to focus on it for like 10 seconds. It's also something that always kind of perked up my ear, where you would hear in the U.S. no accent on any part of the world, but then, if you had a Latino or Latina or Latinx reporter, suddenly, I am Via Senor, suddenly you have a really strong accent from that one place. Well, that's fine to do that accent, but why are we just doing it from that reporter's home country? Don't make yourself the story. So I do my best when we're talking about any part of the world. It's not Agent Press France, it's Agent Press France. It's not Gaza, it's Gaza, and and that's it. And Maria, you just asked me if I trust AI's answers to our Google questions. I do not. I trust them for pronunciation, because because actually I don't think that's AI. If you type, how do you pronounce blah, it doesn't, well, I'll show you. How do you pronounce Gaza? Okay, so there is an AI overview. So I guess the answer to that question is I trust it for pronunciations. I don't trust it for news. If it's news and I'm trying to clarify something, it's kind of like Wikipedia. I'll go to the source that it's citing, right? I'll use it as an overview. And then, like, let's say this was a news story, I would click on that little link it has. And again, I mean, as far as the pronunciations go, I do think it's pretty legit because of things like this. The source AI was drawing from is the Cambridge Dictionary, right? But if you're asking AI, is the military action in Iran a war? You might get a different answer. Or is Israel in the right to attack Lebanon? I don't know, to protect, things that are contentious points. For those, I would never in a million years trust AI, for sure. So I think that's it. That's all I got. I'm happy to answer any more questions. Is it just the three of us?
Yeah, I think we.
Okay, well, I cleared the room. I guess I have a tendency to do that, but
Well,
no one could say I didn't put in the time.
you're well informing, Jesse. I think I hope we can have you back. I think there's other topics we could have you back with. Um,
Sure, absolutely.
well, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us, and especially being and another time. You're like a day ahead of us, so
Well, not quite that far, but a few hours.
almost.
6 hours.
Well,
Well, for you, yeah, like about 9 hours, I guess, ahead of Central
I think
Time.
it's 8. Yeah.
Yeah, something like that.
Well, yeah, just really appreciate you telling us what the headlines are about and your process. It means a lot.
Well, thanks. I honestly didn't know how I was going to fill 30 minutes, so I can't believe this went
Well,
on
you
for
did
2 hours.
good.
That's pretty wild. I guess brevity has never been my strong suit.
Well, thank you
Maybe
again.
more
And
information than you give yourself credit for.
yeah.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And you've both been so nice. It's great to get to know you both, and I'm sure we'll be working together again.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. We look forward to it. And yeah, thank you, Jesse, and thank you to everyone who could make it today and to everyone who's watching on the YouTubes. And have a great rest of your day.
Pacifica Headlines,
Yeah.
WBAI.org.
Stephanie, thanks for letting it go over.
Oh, absolutely. And
Yeah.
say that again, Jesse. Say that for the last tag.
The Pacifica Headlines on WBAI.org, or if you are into getting your news on a podcast, the Pacifica 5-minute morning headlines with Jesse Lent, Jesselent. Thank you very much.
There it is.
Thank you.
All right. See you later.
Take care, guys.